Hello, I'm Mr. BBates1 and this is how to create custom NPCs in Minecraft Bedrock Edition. I did a little poll on my community page recently and the majority of you said that you would like to see videos on how to do this. So here we are. Starting with today's video, we are going to be looking at the tools required to do this, as well as the basics of creating an NPC and basically what different options that you can do. But before we continue, if you like the concept, please consider subscribing. I am on the road to 1k, almost there, and all I need is just your guys' help to get me there. So it would mean a great deal to me if you could subscribe and help me get there. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into today's video. Before we start then, let's get some of the things that we need to download in order to make our NPC. Now, we'll place links in the description so you can just go there and download them, but let's just take a quick look at what we will need. First off then, there is Blockbench. This is the main tool that's going to be used for making our NPCs. It's used by many content creators, including Mojangs themselves. It's free to use and download. If you're on mobile and you can't download it, they actually have a web version as well, which you can do it on there. However, I recommend getting the desktop version if you can do it, because it just makes it a lot easier to use. The next thing we're going to need is Mojang's sample files. Now, these sample files these days are located on GitHub. They are free to access and download, of course. Simply all you would do is download the sample files. It makes it a lot easier when you're looking for something, if you want to implement something that's already in game, you can simply just borrow it from one of these files. Now, when downloading, you want to make sure that you get the latest ones and not the preview ones. Next is a program to do coding with. Now, there are actually a few choices you can use, because obviously making an NPC isn't all about the visuals. There is some level of JSON knowledge required, but there is software that does make it easier for us. So just listing some of the ones that we can use, there is obviously, which is probably the best for beginners, is an application called Bridge. Now, they also have a web version as well, but I would obviously recommend downloading and installing it on your desktop. Now, with Bridge, this pretty much sets up everything you need. It's all simply just clicking, filling in the details, and clicking OK. And it kind of sets everything up in the order that you need it to be in. It does a lot of the hard work for you, so it allows you to just get on with the main fun stuff. There is also Visual Code Studio. Now, right off the bat, this is not as user-friendly as Bridge. So if you're a bit more knowledgeable in JSON and you don't necessarily need the hand-holding that Bridge gives you, obviously Visual Studio is better for coding, not just Minecraft stuff. For Minecraft stuff, though, you do need to download an extension, this called Blockception, and this will basically help and just sort of gives you that support for Minecraft Bedrock coding. But for the purpose of this video though, I shall be using a basic JSON editor that I tend to use a lot in my videos, which is called CodeWriter. Now, the reason for this is that a lot of it I'm just going to be displaying it to you, and this is a very low-end editor. It doesn't have any features or anything over-exaggerated in it, so it's just a lot easier to show code off than the more powerful application. But obviously, whichever one you choose is up to you. There's a link to each one down in the description below. Pick whichever one that suits you better. Now that we have all the tools we need, it's time to start making our NPC. Now, there is a couple of ways of doing this. For example, you could modify the existing NPC and give it new features. I did a video on this a little while ago on how to add trading ability to the current NPC. However, this may not be suitable. You may actually already be using NPCs in your world, and maybe you don't want to change around with the default ones. So editing the existing one obviously is going to create undesirable effects. So you may want to add your own. So in this video today, we're going to cover 3 different ways of adding an NPC. The first one is going to be duplicating the existing NPC. The second one will be taking other mobs and entities in the game and turning them into an NPC. And then the final third option will be creating a fresh, brand new NPC. So the easiest way to duplicate built-in NPCs then is simply by taking the code from the sample packs and just modifying them slightly to do what we need to do. So if we open our sample pack up, and we actually go inside here, you can see that it has the resource and the behavior pack. So what we're going to need to do then is we're going to need to take a couple of files from the resource and the behavior pack. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into behavior pack, and then we're going to go into entities, and then we're going to look for the NPC. And for the minute, I'm just going to throw that on my desktop. I want to then do the same for the resource pack. I want to go into this, go into entities, and we want to search for the NPC as well. So now that we have the 2 files we need to duplicate the existing NPC, it's time to create the actual packs. I've got a folder here on my desktop called Custom NPC Demo, and in here I have my behavior pack and my resource pack. Now, if you don't know what to do to set these up, there was a video I did on this a little while ago called How to Create Your Own Behavior Pack and How to Create Your Own Resource Pack. Do check that out. It's only a quick video, but that will explain to you how you can set up your own stuff. Now, if you're using Bridge, obviously, this will be done for you, so you don't need to worry about that. So the first thing we're going to do is open up our behavior packs folder, and you want to create a folder called entities. And then in here, you want to take the first JSON file that we took from the behavior pack and just place it in this folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename it just so there's no confusion over what it is. So now it's time to modify the file. There's only like two things that we really need to do. So the first thing is that we want to change the identifier. Now this is because the built-in NPC is, as you can see here, is Minecraft :NPC. We just need to give it a unique name so that it then becomes a different entity. So in this case, I'm going to do B because that's my initials, and then I'm going to put custom NPC. And then under this, I'm going to add a new option. Now the reason why we do this is because there are certain functions and features of an NPC that you cannot code through JSON. And that is things like when you put an NPC down in creative mode, if you hit it once, it'll disappear and get rid of it and stuff like that. That's hard coded, so you add the runtime identifier so that you apply that feature to your NPC. And then all we need to do is just save that, and we're now done with this file. Now we're going to go out and into our resource pack folder and do the same again, create a folder called entity, and in here we want to copy the original NPC over, again renaming the file. And this time we only need to change one thing, which is this up here. So again, this needs to match the name that we used in the previous file. Once that's done, we can simply click save. Now as it stands, that is now ready to use. We can place this in our Minecraft folders and we can use it, and it'll be an exact duplicate of the current Minecraft NPC. Now rather than packaging these files up and installing them through the normal method, what we're going to do first of all is that we're just going to dump them into the development folder. This means then that we can make changes and adjust it as we see fit, and we only need to package it up when it's ready. Now in order to do that, I've already got a shortcut on my desktop here, but if we load that up, you can see that it is simply going to the name of your user, app, data, local, packages, and you want to look for Minecraft, local state, games, and .com Mojang. Now once in this location, you are going to see a development behavior packs folder and a development resource packs folder. Now what we want to do is that we want to copy the files that we made already and place them in either one of these locations. So this is the behavior packs folder, so I'm copying this one over, and we're going to do the same with the resource pack. We are now ready to attach this pack to a world and spawn in a custom NPC. So what we're going to want to do is we're just going to go to our behavior packs folder and add the pack that we've just added. And I've just added that to the active one, and I've done the same with the resource. And now that we're back in this world, if we simply open up the menu and type in NPC, you can see we have our own NPC there, which I've left the egg obviously as the default one. So if we do the command for the default one, we look at our inventory, you can see they look the same, but they are effectively two different NPCs. So this is our custom one. We'll place them there, and as you can see, they don't look any different, and this is the inbuilt one. Now, as you can see, they look exactly identical. And when you use one, obviously it's exactly the same as any other NPC, and everything still works the same. You can assign them skins from the normal NPC pack. And as you can see, there's no difference. They look identical, but the difference being is that one's an official NPC, this one is a duplicate. So that is the most easiest way of getting a basic NPC in. But obviously you don't necessarily always want to use the default NPC. Maybe you want to use one of the mobs in the game, you know, like a blaze or cow, even a creeper, and you want to use them for something instead. So let's take a look at how we add one of those in. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open up Blockbench, and we're going to want to install a plugin. So if you just go to File and Plugins, and then under the Available tab, the first thing you want to look for is Minecraft Entity Wizard, and we just simply want to install that. Once it's installed, you will notice it will appear down the bottom here as Minecraft Entity Wizard. All we need to do is click on Let's Go to trigger the wizard itself. The reason why we're doing this is that it already sets up all the animation and all the sort of like the basic sort of textures and everything we need from the Minecraft mobs, saves us having to pull them all from the sample file. So in order to get the ball rolling, we just need to fill in the gaps basically. So in this case, I'm just going to name it Blaze NPC, and then we're just going to cycle through it. So I'm going to pick my Blaze for my appearance, and then for the behavior, I'm going to click different behavior. We don't really want it to do anything because we're going to change that ourselves anyway, so we're just going to leave it as basic still for now. The next thing we're going to want to do is set our egg, and then lastly we just want to finalize the last few things. Now it doesn't really matter what we're doing here because we need to modify it anyway, which means we're going to pick the pack apart, change the things that we want to change, and then update it afterwards. So I'm just going to simply click as export as MC add-on. However, you can directly import it into Minecraft as well using the export to folder option, but for now we're just going to stick it as that. Now if you carry on from here and simply click edit model, it will take you to Blockbench directly, as you can see behind me there. And as you can see, this is our entity. Now this looks broken, but for a blaze this is perfectly fine and normal. If we go to the animate section, for example, as you can see, this is what happens when the blaze will be in the game. Now that we have our add-on file, we just simply want to open this up with an archive program. In this case, I'm using WinRAR, and all we really want to do is pull out the resources. Now, because we already made our pack earlier on, our demo, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these files and dump it into here, and as you can see, they're now all in our folder. And if we look before, we have our original NPC that we created a minute ago, and we also have the blaze one there as well. Now we don't need anything from the behavior pack. As I mentioned before, we are replacing that. So we can now close that down. Now it's time to add in the behavior so that we can turn the blaze into an NPC. We do this by going back to our behavior pack file, back into our entities folder. And the easiest thing to do is just copy this previous one that we made. Or if you haven't created this one, simply copy the NPC one from your sample file. So we're going to give it a new name, and then we're going to open that up in our editor. Now because we copied it from our previous one, obviously it's already pre-filled in with the previous name that we had and the runtime identifier and everything else like that. But obviously if this was a fresh one, you'll simply just update the name again. So in this case, we're going to rename this to Blaze NPC. And we're going to make sure that the runtime identifier is there. And last but not least, we're going to scroll down and we're going to look for the Minecraft NPC component. Now if you'll notice, it lists a number of variations here. Now the blaze itself only has one variation, so we do not need all of these. So the easiest thing would be to just simply remove them all, leaving just variant 0. Now that looks absolutely spot on, so we'll just save that. Now that's all we need to do to convert our blaze into an NPC. So all we need to do is throw this development packs folder. So if we look in our creative inventory, we should be able to now see a blaze NPC. And if we spawn this in and place it next to our other one, as you can see, we now have a new NPC. One skin variant, does exactly the same as the previous NPC. You can type in any text you want here. You can add in any command that you want here. And it really is as quick as that. We now have 2 different custom NPCs in our game that look completely different to one another. One's even got animations, and it's all looking fantastic. But what happens if you want to build something that's not already in the game? It means that we got to pop back to Blockbench. Let's go back to Blockbench and see how we make fully customized one. And actually, before we load up Blockbench, what we do actually need to do is go back to our sample files, and we do need to pull a file out of there. Now, the reason for this is that when making custom mobs, obviously you can make any size that you want, but for the purpose of this tutorial video, it's going to take far too long to make it really, really customized. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a basic humanoid shape from the files, and I'm going to use this to create my own custom NPC. But essentially, you will be able to create sort of any kind of NPC you want, texturize it, and put it in the same way. So the actual file that I'm going to grab from the pack itself, so if we go into the resource pack, and then we go into models, and there's like a little one here called mobs, and I'm just going to copy that to the desktop. Once that's done, we're going to load up Blockbench. Now that we're back into Blockbench, what we can do is we can import our file that we had earlier. Now when you first select the mobs file, it's going to come up with a list because there's quite a few in here that you can select and choose from. What I'm going to do is that I am just taking a basic humanoid, just purely because it's easier to import this. And as you can see, it just creates a basic humanoid for us. Now in a lot of the showcase videos that I've done in the past, this is basically what I've done when I've created my own custom NPCs. There was one, for example, where I was doing the dialogue tutorial. I brought in various people around the castle, like the king and Lady Caroline and the knight and things like that. Or when I was doing the trader video, I actually had a butler that was following me around everywhere. That was the same NPC, it just had different behavior properties on it. So let's get into modifying this NPC then to look how we want it to look. Now the first things first, you'll notice that the textures are all over the place. So what we want to do is we want to just tidy that up. We're going to go over to textures here. I'm going to go click create texture. Now we want to make sure that the type is on template, pixel density is on 64, rearrange UV is ticked. Now most of these are ticked by default, so you shouldn't have to worry about changing them, but if they're not, make sure they're done. And then when you're ready, click confirm. And if you notice now, everything has been recolored, sort of coded to say that this is where it belongs. And over here, this is the sort of grid map, shows you, what part of the body connects to what. Now you can export this, paint over it and create your own skin, or if you want to do what I did, is that you can take a skin from online and import it in yourself, and you do that by clicking the import texture button here. Now I've imported in my texture, but at the moment, as you can see, it is not there. So what we want to do is just click on it and it's going to do this. Now obviously at the moment our textures are all over the place, so what we need to do is just reposition the textures on each element so that they look good. So the first thing we're going to do is, because we've pulled the file in from the main Minecraft file, there is a bunch of stuff in here that isn't necessary, and what I want to do is I'm just going to remove those out. So things like body armor, I'm not planning on putting armor on my entity, so we do not need these in. And I don't intend on my entity holding items, but if you did want it to hold items, you would leave this in place. So once all the elements have been deleted, then the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to reposition it. So we're going to start from the body, and when you click on an element over here, you'll notice that an outline appears over here in the little textures area. Simply all we need to do is drag and move it around to make sure that it fits in the right place. Now for the actual body of the character I've got here, that is the body section. Now we're going to do the head, the right arm and left arm, and both of the legs. Now that looks cool and everything, but if you notice there are other elements as well on the actual skin, which gives it that 3D sort of effect. Off the bat, those aren't in here, but all we need to do is click on each one of these elements, right click it and click duplicate. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it another name. It isn't really imperative, but I do this just so I know which one's which. And we want to do this for each item. Now that we duplicate all these items, we just need to make a minor change to the property and then reposition the texture. Click on our duplicate option, and up here you'll see that there's an option called inflate. Now you want to click on that and change it to 0.5. And you want to do this for each element. So now that we've done that, we just need to go back over each one again and then reposition them. So for the body itself, we just need to reposition it. So in this case, the elements for the body actually sits under here. And obviously we can adjust however we need it to be. And if you notice, it's now giving that 3D effect. And we just simply do the same for each element. And now that's been done, as you can see, we've got ourselves a 3D model. Now that's done, as you can see, we've got ourselves Captain America. Now, if you want to extend on the basic humanoid and add additional things, like, I don't know, maybe a nose, or maybe you want to extrude out the sides on this helmet, you can do so by simply just creating your own cube, by right-clicking and click cube. And if we just pull this out for a minute, you'll notice there's a cube here. It doesn't have anything in it, because obviously it's positioned in an area that has no textures. But obviously if we move it to an area, you can see that it's coloured in. And what you can simply do is move it around, and obviously we can reshape it. Obviously I'm not going to mess around too much with this, but essentially you would use the positions and the size up here to sort of readjust what you want it to be, so you can create even more 3D elements. Once you're happy with your model, it is ready to be exported. So in this case, you'd simply go to File, Export, and you want to select Bedrock, Export Bedrock Entity. Now all this will do is it will export a JSON file. The texture itself it won't. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to take your texture file as well and place it into your pack. But first of all, we're going to export the Bedrock Entity and save this to the desktop. Now there is a few more things we have to do, because obviously as I mentioned before, because we're creating it from scratch, it does mean that we have to create a lot more other files as well to go with it. So I've saved it on the desktop as Marvel. All this stuff from Blockbench is resource stuff, so it's going to go into your resource pack side. So we're simply going to go on to resource pack, and for the file that comes out of Blockbench, you want to put in the models folder. So we go models, entity, and as you can see our Blaze NPC is there. We didn't have one for the first custom NPC because we're basically just using one from Minecraft, so we don't need that. But obviously the Blaze one, using the entity wizard, will create one for you. Well, in this case we're going to take our Marvel one and we're going to throw it in here. One thing to note when copying over your Marvel geometry file is naming convention is very important, so we want to just name it marvel.geo.json. Make sure it's in that right format. Now once your actual file is here, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the name of the geometry is right. Now because we copied it from the mobs.json folder originally, it's going to have a default name, and obviously we don't want it to use that default name, so we do need to just update that. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to just update the name, which obviously in this case was humanoid, so I'm just going to change that to Marvel. And then we're going to save that. Once we've made sure that the geometry file has a unique name, the next thing we need to do is add entity information. So in our entity folder, we want to create a new one. Now I've already added one here already, but I've called it marvel.entity.json. Now inside this, we are going to want to set up the JSON like so. So I've got the format as 1.10, just because it's a basic simple format, doesn't require a lot of stuff. The newer versions require you to supply extra elements for the NPC. For now, we're not going to touch on that. Obviously, we're only looking for basic stuff, but we will change this format version at some point in the future when we want to add more stuff. But for now, we're going to stick to 1.10. We've set up our identifier as b.marvel. Now, the materials part is actually quite complex when it comes to trying to determine what materials to use. I've used the entity alpha test. This is purely because this allows for transparent textures. Under the textures section, the first thing we are going to want to do is define our textures. Now, as you can see here, I've named it Captain America, and then I have pasted in the location of that skin. Now, you don't actually need the file extension for the skin. We only need the name. Minecraft will do the rest. Oh, and I've just realised I've named that wrong. And our geometry needs to be the same name as what it was before. And lastly, I've added in a render controller called controller.render.marvel. Now we're going to take a look at this in just a second. This is probably the most difficult part, obviously sorting out the JSON in the right formatting and putting the right information in. This pack itself will be on my GitHub page, so you can download it and take a look at it in closer inspection. And obviously it's always easier to tweak already made stuff than necessarily starting from scratch. But this is the generalistics of our entity file. The next of our render controllers, so we want to create a folder called render controllers. Now again, with the naming conventions, I've got it marvel.render_controllers. Now in this particular render controller, we are using the 1.8 format, just again purely because it's, we're not doing anything fancy with it. We only need the older version. Everything else is fine. And what we've done is that we've listed the name of the texture for our NPC, which is the Captain America texture. Now this name here has to match the name that is within the texture list. So if we go back to our entity, we open this up again, it's this name here that it has to match. So it must always match that. We are telling it to use the default geometry defined, which we defined in our other entity files, so we don't need to change anything else there. And the same for the materials, we are telling it to use the default materials defined. Now for this texture bit on its own, I've put this in for now because this is what we will be using, it's what the NPC uses anyway, and we will be touching on this a bit later on. But this is essentially telling the render controller to use whatever variant that has been defined. And the variants are in order, so the first one being 0, the second one being 1, third one being 2, and so on and so forth. Because we've only got one texture at the moment, only need the one variant, but we'll still leave this in anyway, so we can expand on that later. So now we have our main entity file, we have our main geometry file, and we have our render controller. That is everything done on the resource pack side. We shouldn't need to do anything else now. The last thing we need to do is switch over to the behavior pack, and we need to create a Marvel one for that. So I've created one here called Marvel. And this is basically just the same as these other two NPC ones. I've just copied it, and then in the file itself, I've updated the identifier, made sure that there was a runtime identifier in there, and I have shortened the skin list down to just variant 0. Now that's everything. That should be your custom NPC ready. So we are back once again in our Minecraft world for the final time. It's been an interesting journey here, creating the different NPCs, but let's get on with the last NPC now. Now if we add this entity in as well, as you can see, we now have Captain America. And it operates exactly the same as all the other NPCs. Obviously we've only got the one skin, but we do have the dialogue, and we do have advanced settings as well, so you can add buttons and all the other kind of things. And there we have it. We have the basics of adding our own custom NPC. But as I mentioned to you before, we still have a tiny little bit left to do. For an example, we do need to update the name of our spawn eggs because they are not looking very user friendly, as we can see down the bottom here. So let's take a look at how we do that. Now going back to our original resource pack folder, now because we were messing around with the entity wizard earlier, it's kind of already done stuff for us, and that is essentially create a text folder. Now in this folder you will see that it has a language file, and this is basically what the game uses to name things in the game. Now as you can see, it already pre-filled it in for the Blaze NPC, but obviously we want to add it for our other ones as well. We just simply copy what's already there. So you want to do both an entity name and both a spawn egg name. So as you can see, I've renamed them. I've kind of split them up a little bit just to make it easier to see. So obviously this was the original Blaze. I've sort of renamed that a little bit. This is the duplicate NPC that we made. And then this is our Marvel one, which we have titled Avenger. Naming conventions is very, very important. Everything needs to match exactly, so make sure that this element here and this element here correctly matches the name of your entity. Now that we're back in the game, obviously we can take a look at our eggs, and as you can see, spawn Blaze NPC, there's our Blaze NPC, spawn and an Avenger, there's our Avenger, and spawn a duplicate NPC, there's our NPC. And that's it. That is the very basics of how to create custom NPCs. Now you can create as many as you want. Obviously all you need to do is keep giving it unique names using existing mobs, or using your own designs off the internet, or just completely making your own shape. Obviously this is just a humanoid shape, but using Blockbench you can create all sorts of amazing things. If you go to the Blockbench Discord channel, you will see some of the amazing creations that people can create there. I will admit I'm nowhere near that sort of level of creativity when it comes to creating these things in Blockbench, but some people can make some amazing things. But that's the very basics then of creating custom NPCs. Thank you very much for getting to the end of the video. I'll catch you all guys next time. Bye!